Hi, good morning. Yes, it's me again, Freddy Baksa, and for today's activity, I will going to make a video discussion presenting three topics. First to discuss is the administering assessment. Second topic, learning resources or instructional materials. And the last topic to be discussed is demonstrating accommodation, particularly to learners with special needs or disability. So, let's start. First, administering assessment. Assessment in education refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to measure and document the academic readiness, learning progress, and educational needs of students. Here are the four steps of the assessment cycle. Step 1. Clearly define and identify the learning outcomes. So, bago magpa-exam ang isang guro or bago siya magpagawa ng isang performance task, ay kailangan muna niyang gumawa ng mga learning outcomes. It could be 3 to 5 learning outcomes. And these learning outcomes should describe what students should be able to do, referring to the abilities to know and to appreciate values and attitudes, and of course kung ano na yung mga natutunan ng isang bata. For example, sa mga garments students, after the unit course, pwedeng gawin ni teacher na learning outcomes ang kaya na ba nilang magtahi ng mga damit, kaya na ba nilang i-demo kung paano gumamit ng sewing machine. So those are some example of learning outcomes that the teacher would like to see from the students after the unit course. Step number 2. Select appropriate assessment and measures and assess the learning outcomes. Halimbawa, sa step number 1 kanina ay nakapag-create ka na ng learning outcomes. For example, gusto mong makita ang mga GFD students na kaya na ba nilang magtahi ng mga damit or kaya na ba nilang i-manipulate ang sewing machine. Then sa step number 2, as a teacher, syempre ipagamit mo sa kanila ay isang sewing machine during their performance task, and you are going to grade them objectively. Step number 3, analyze the results of the outcomes assessed. Meaning to say, you are not only going to give a grade your students, but rather make a judgment. Maybe your students failed to meet the learning outcomes, or your students successfully met the learning outcomes you created that you want to obtain from them. Step number 4, adjust or improve programs following the results of the learning outcomes. Meaning to say, the results of the assessment should be disseminated widely to faculty in the departments in order to seek their inputs on how to improve programs from assessment result. Here are the three common types of assessment in education. First, we have the diagnostic assessment. Ang halimbawa ng diagnostic assessment ay ang pag-a-administer ng pre-test sa mga estudyante before the instruction. Ang purpose ng diagnostic assessment is to assess the strengths, the weaknesses, the abilities, the knowledge of the students of a certain topic before ito i-introduce sa kanila. Yun po ang purpose ng diagnostic assessment. Second one is the formative assessment. This type of assessment is done during the instruction. For example, during class hours or sa kalagitnaan ng klase, pwede nang magtanong si teacher related sa kanyang dinidiscuss, or after 2 days of the discussion, pwedeng mag-administer si teacher ng short quiz. And the purpose of this assessment is to help the students identify their strengths and weaknesses in target areas and help the faculties to recognize the students' problem and address it immediately. The last type of assessment is the summative assessment. From the prefix word sum, yung kabuuan, or it means the summative assessment is administered to know the totality of students' learning at the end of the instructional unit. Example of this assessment may include exams, final projects for the whole subject at the end of the semester. Aside from quizzes, examinations, here are some examples of assessment techniques that a teacher can utilize. It can be in the form of observation, checklists, conversation, interviews, journals, portfolios, performance tasks, and many more. And among the three types of assessment that was mentioned before, the purposes of assessment are gathers information to assist in decision making, monitoring students' progress, useful in assigning grades, and determining one's own instructional effectiveness. And in conclusion, the proper administration of assessment instrument in education is essential in obtaining valid or meaningful scores for test takers and academic development for all the students. Let's move on to the next topic of this video presentation, the learning resources or instructional materials. Teachers at all levels utilize a variety of instructional materials such as textbooks, presentations, and many more to enhance the quality of their lessons. The quality of those materials directly impacts the quality of teaching. The importance of instructional materials, rather, is to improve students' knowledge, abilities, skills, and to contribute to their overall development and upbringing. It also clarifies the important concepts to arouse and sustain students' interest. In constructing an effective instructional materials, these are the factors that should be considered. First, the IMs should be appropriate for the subject matter. Second, the IMs should be appropriate for the age, social development, or ability levels of the students. For examples, kapag kindergarten yung tuturuan, and of course, yung mga instructional materials na ibibigay sa kanila ay dapat mga pambata. For example, mga educational toys, mga word puzzles, and everything not pambata. And of course, the instructional materials that will be utilized in the classroom, it should be related in the learning objectives of the subject matter. In the conclusion for this topic, we should not forget that the teacher is the best instructional material. As the saying goes, you are the captain of your mind and the master of your soul. Teacher is the captain of the classroom because of molding the minds of the students to become competent and independent individuals when it comes to excellence. Master of the classroom because teachers are providing good feedbacks and developing the potential of the students through nurturing their minds for the possibilities in life. Moving on to the last topic of this video presentation, demonstrating accommodation particularly to learners with special needs or disability. Accommodation is a change that helps a student work or overcome around the disability. For example, during examination day, kapag may isang estudyante na hirap isulat ang kanyang mga sagot, then the teacher may administer accommodation through letting that students express his answer verbally or orally. That is accommodation. Accommodation means same lessons, same materials, same questions should be given or administered to both learners with disabilities alongside with regular students within a classroom. Ang pinagkaiba lang, si teacher ay magkakaroon ng konting adjustments for the students with special needs in order for them to learn the lesson at their convenience at para mas mai-express nila ang kanilang mga sagot during examination at para mas mai-express nila ang kanilang mga natutunan sa isang subject course. Accommodations are most often made in the following areas. First, in scheduling or in meeting the deadline. Kapag ang isang estudyante ay hirap tapusin ang mga activities at hindi niya maipapasa ang mga ito within the given due date, ang pwedeng gawin ni teacher na accommodation is to give that students extra time to finish that activities. Second, in setting. Halimbawa, kapag ang isang estudyante ay masyadong sensitive, ayaw niya sa maingay na lugar kasi hindi siya makapag-focus sa pag-aaral, pwedeng ang gawin ni teacher na accommodation for that student is to let that student stay in a classroom with no disturbance. Third, in student response. Kagaya ng sinabi ko kanina, kapag ang isang estudyante ay hirap sa pagsusulat, hindi na kayang i-express ang kanyang mga sagot through writing, ang pwedeng gawin ni teacher na accommodation for him is to let that student express his answer verbally or orally. And lastly, in the presentation of the lesson, kapag ang isang estudyante ay hirap basahin ang mga words or letters sa mga libro or textbooks, ang pwedeng gawin ni teacher na accommodation for this type of learner ay pwede siyang gumawa ng audio recording na naglalaman pa rin the same lesson in the textbook. Some examples of additional services and supports for the education of children with disabilities called Supplementary Aids and Services in Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or IDEA are: first, adapted equipment such as special seat. Second, assistive technology such as word processor or a communication. Third, peer tutors. Fourth, adapted materials such as books, on-tape, large print, or highlighted notes. In conclusion for this topic, accommodations can be so vital to helping children with disabilities access the general curriculum, participate in school, including extracurricular and academic activities, and be educated alongside with their peers without disabilities. The idea reinforces their use again and again in its requirements, in its definitions, and in its principles. This is the end of my video presentation and I hope you learned something. My name is Freddy Baksa from BSE 2 Major in Social Science. Always keep on learning. Keep safe everyone.